We'd like to welcome you to the Healthcare Revolution podcast, where we empower you to take control of your health, restore your trust in the medical system, and achieve lasting wellness. I am your host, Brad Powell, Doctor of Physical Therapy and owner of an award-winning foundation physical therapy here in the Salt Lake Valley. Each episode, we dive into all things rehab prevention, overall health, bringing you expert insights from leaders across the healthcare fields. Please note, while we aim to provide with the best knowledge and advice, the opinions shared represent those of experts in the field and are not to be replaced with professional medical advice. So let's revolutionize healthcare and wellness together. Welcome to the Healthcare Revolution podcast. Today's episode, we are talking about common myths when talking about recovery. There's so many things out on the market now about compression boots and saunas and cold plunges, which all have value. But I think there's some misconceptions with these types of things. And like I said, they do have value. They do have benefits. They have long-term benefits. But there are some better things out there, some basic fundamental things that don't require a lot of money, and which is going to get much more benefit. When we're talking about recovery tools, these recovery tools are really only getting you 3 to 5% of recovery. When we're talking about nutrition, sleep, and movement, that's going to get you 85-90% of full recovery. So, I heard an athlete once say, they were being interviewed and they said, "What is the key to your recovery and your success?" And they said, "I just slept." And that's ultimately, we get the majority of recovery just from sleeping, just from eating right, just from consistently moving. And we're going to abolish a lot of these myths and also talk about how they are helpful as well. So today we have with us Lauren. Lauren's going to ask us the questions that are coming from the community and kind of abolish a lot of these myths.
Alrighty, well, let's get started with our first myth. Our first one is, I will catch up on sleep later.
If you've ever read the book, The Body Keeps Score, you know this isn't true. Sleep is something you need to regularly get. I love the Whoop watches. I don't get any financial incentives to talk about them, but I love talking about them with my patients because it gives you this score. It gives you a scoreboard to say how much you've recovered from the previous day. And if you're consistently getting, 4 hours of sleep, the research says that your cognition is equal to someone that's intoxicated if you're getting regularly less than 4 hours of sleep for a certain period of time, right? So our brain, our body, it needs sleep. And a lot of the research is saying up to 8 hours now, 8 to 9 hours versus 7 to 8, because that sleep is the repairing cycle. Our bodies, when we work out, when we exercise, they're literally breaking down. They're not getting stronger during the workout. You get stronger as you actually recover. So the sleep aspect, I'm not saying you got to go sleep for 15 hours, right? You can overdo these types of things. You don't need that. What you need is a consistent level of 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and even 8 to 9 hours now. There's so much stimulus in the world that we're dealing with. The body needs to recover. So to go to your question, you need to sleep consistently. There is, yes, you can catch up more on the weekends, but it doesn't really work like that. There is this bank account that's happening, and if you don't choose to actively get rest, your body will force you into rest, whether it's through an injury, whether it's through sickness. It'll force you down if you don't consistently get it.
Yeah, I feel like most of us have experienced
You're
that
like, been there, done that.
once or twice. So our next myth that everyone wants to know is, nutrition doesn't matter if I train hard.
I think just in the way you said that is like, well, yeah, nutrition does matter. I mean, so many people don't realize your caloric intake, your protein intake is very important to the way you build your body, right? Protein is simply the building blocks of your whole musculoskeletal system, right? If you don't have the basic building blocks, your body actually breaks down muscle, converts it to fat to save it for a rainy day if you don't have enough protein. So people are like, well, I'm going to get fat if I eat protein. Actually, it's the opposite. If you don't eat protein, you actually will get fat because your body will break down muscle, convert it to fat because it thinks it's in this state of fight or flight, and it's got to save for a rainy day. because it's not sure if you're going to provide it the nutrients that it needs. So making sure you have the appropriate amount of nutrition, have the appropriate amount of protein levels is super critical to your overall performance. Those are literally the energy that fuels you. You can't outrun, all of these mechanisms. You have to eat right and exercise well if you want to perform well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Next one is kind of on the same train. A protein shake is all I need for recovery.
So really there's two different types. Well, in my mind, there's two different types of protein, right? There's the supplemental protein, and then there's like the organic, real protein that you get from foods, right? Both have a role. They both have a purpose. And if you are regularly eating and, you're getting a certain level of protein from beans or from edamame or whatever it is from meat, a lot of people think meat is the only source of protein. There's so many other ways that you can get protein. But ultimately, with the protein, there is the real organic stuff that you get from foods. That should take up around 70-80% of your diet, of your protein intake, and then 30% can maybe be supplemental. And it plays a role, right? So you're just supplementing to get to your goal. The general guidelines here is if you're building muscle, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if you weigh 150 pounds, 150 grams of protein is what you'd be shooting for if you're going for muscle gains, right? And there's other equations that you can look up that give you guidelines to maintain. And there's also a minimum standard that you have to intake in order to just regenerate skin and regenerate hair and just the basic building blocks. If you're not getting even the minimum, which is the majority of people, I'm not even kidding you. If I had $1 for every patient that came in and said, yeah, I eat a ton of protein, and then we look at their data, they're actually not even, most of them are not even hit the minimum standard. They're not even get the minimum to build just the basic building blocks of their bones, muscles, tendons, ligaments, all the above, right? And it's so important you know where you are. So I challenge yourself. You think that you eat a lot of protein, track it. Just write it down. Write down everything you have for the day. 1 egg, I think, has 3 grams of protein. How many eggs you got to eat to get 150 grams? That's a lot of eggs.
A lot of eggs.
And but ultimately track it. If you want something to improve, or if you truly want to know where things are, don't be self-deceived. Just measure it. And then you know where you're at. And then you can know how much, 80% needs to come from food, 70 to 80%, and then around 20 to 30% needs to come supplement, or can come supplement. Then you know how to get to that goal that you're shooting for.
Okay. I feel like that makes it much easier to understand.
So simple when you start to track it.
Yeah. Our next one is ice baths are the key to recovery.
So this one's funny to me because these cold plunges are coming, which are super cool and I'm super supportive of. And there's a lot of health benefits long term that can come from them. And they're presenting a lot of this research, right? But if we're talking about recovery and you're like neglecting sleep and you're like, I'm getting 4 hours a night and I'm eating Doritos for every meal, right? Like I'm just eating not well, but then I'm going to go cold plunge. Like it's counterintuitive, but so many people are like this. I'm pounding Monster Energy drinks all day, but I'm going to go to a sauna at night because it's cardiovascularly, saunas are the best. It's like, okay, I'm going to destroy my heart, but then I'm going to go counteract it with a sauna. Like that is the biggest lie. You got to be taking care of your heart on a regular basis. And yes, it does have these cardiovascular circulatory benefits, but if you're not doing the regular things, it literally can do nothing for you. You're literally destroying it 80% of the time, but then you're going to go help it 3% of the time. We got to come to a consensus on what it truly means, because we don't want to get the wrong idea with these recovery tools. Do the best simple things well. You're going to get, it's kind of like the 80-20 rule. If you do really 80% of the stuff that you do really matters. 20% doesn't, right? But if you really want to get the best benefit, do the things that matter most, right? Eat right, sleep right, right? If you just do those 2 things and exercise on a regular basis, you're going to get 90% of recovery just from that. And then the other stuff is just on top of it, right? That's how you're taking care of yourself, how you're, your emotional state, your support system, the sauna, the ice bath, right? They're just those little supplemental things that you can do additionally if you're doing all the other things well.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense because we see them on Instagram and stuff literally all the time.
And the research is good.
Yeah.
But it's very minimal compared to the things that the foundational skills that you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Our next one is on the same page. Saunas also speed up muscle recovery.
It's minimal. If you really look at the research, it is minimal. Again, sleep is going to get most of that. And saunas, what I love about saunas is they calm you, right? They put you in a peaceful state. It helps your neurologic system really be calmed in a very stimulated world. So for mental health, for psychological help, there's just so many benefits to being in saunas that I think we neglect, and there's so much research to support that. But what I really want to hit home is we got to do the simple things well is on top of it. Like you're not going to counteract it by getting in a sauna, your health, right? You're not going to drastically improve recovery if you're not doing the simple things well. And I think that's kind of the message of this podcast is do the simple things well first, and then do the supplemental. And if we were to compare it to protein, I love that. 80% of your recovery, even up to 90%, should come from the 3 pillars, and we don't want to neglect the 4th pillar, which is psychological and emotional. Psychological connection, social connection, right? There's so many benefits from being in a sauna room where you feel connected to other people. If you've ever sat in a sauna with a group of people, like you get talking about some random things. I feel like it's like a hairstylist, right? It's all of a sudden we're in some psychology session where we're all talking about our problems. But there's so many good things, but we just can't neglect the most important things first. Think of these things as supplemental, not as replacing. You can't get 4 hours of sleep and think you're going to go counteract that by going into a sauna. It's just a lie. We got to do the simple things well, and then let's get the supplemental stuff on top of it.
So the next one that our listeners really want to know is about compression boots, because these are a new thing. Compression boots make you recover faster.
So we have compression boots in our clinics, and we love them. A lot of them, what we use them for is total knee replacements, a lot of ankle swelling, because we use the compression and elevation at the same time, which has a lot of circulatory benefit. So it helps the cardiovascular system, the vessels to be able to compress and contract and relax and get a lot of the fluid out of the feet. The research is good. It's minimal with how much it helps with recovery. You think about 24 hours in a day out of the boots. Maybe you put 20 minutes in the boots. How much is that going to actually help? Right? It's gonna get blood flowing faster. It's gonna get some of those repairing cycles working. Is it really gonna create like monumental changes? No. Think about these compression boots as a supplement, just like we've talked about. All of these extra recovery tools should be supplemental. They shouldn't just be like to fix X, Y, and Z. Do the simple things well, and then let's add all these other components on top of it. Because compression boots have a lot of value, but they don't replace the important things. They just add to, and they make it better. But you think about, the body has a natural muscle pump in the legs when you move your ankles. So the muscles actually contract and relax, which pushes on the blood vessels, the arteries and veins, so that when they contract, they actually push fluid in and out. But when you have a passive structure that's compressing for us, it really helps improve circulation, because when you have an injury, you most likely have some vascular components that are interrupted because there's some tearing or some shearing forces. So it's helping push those fluid through those portions to get better blood flow. So there's so much value through those vasomnemonic compression, which we just call compression boots, that can add value to someone's life. Now, do you need to go buy this, $2,000, $3,000 machine? I don't know. It really depends on how you train. It depends on if you're doing the simple things right and you're just adding this as supplemental. But it should never be to replace other things.
So our next myth that we're going to go over is rest days mean doing nothing.
That is very common misconception. A lot of people think that it's like, oh, I'm going to go run a marathon, and then Saturday, Sunday, I'm literally just going to lay on the couch or sit and binge watch TV. That is not rest. That is literally sedentarism. So your body actually needs blood flow to repair, right? So you get the sleep, 8 to 9 hours, and then get your butt moving around. Go grocery shopping. Go for a swim. Like there's so many, instead of saying rest, we should say active recovery. There's really not a ton of benefits to complete bed rest. I quote this study all the time. When I was in school, we put college students in bed for 7 days and we measured their muscle mass. We wanted to see how much muscle mass they would lose and how much strength they would lose. These are young college students. They were 20 to 30 years old. And they couldn't stand. So, we told them they could stand to go to a bedside commode, which is like a little toilet next to the bed. And then you have to go back in bed, but no steps. That was the requirement. These people lost some up to 50% strength in 7 days. Literally 1 day of complete bed rest can have some detrimental effects. The younger you are, the quicker you bounce back. But ultimately, your body is meant to break down. And if you don't tell it to build it back up through exercise and through strengthening, the bones get weaker. If you don't add appropriate stresses to them, skin gets weaker. What happens when you compress your hands? You build callus, right? You actually build bony structure. The bones get stronger. So your bone density actually improves, right? So osteoporotic women, most women, as they get older, develop brittle bones. Why? Well, there's some menopausal, there's some hormonal changes that happen, but ultimately we can reverse that just by lifting weights and adding resistance to bones, right? Tendons, meniscus, disc in the spine, they all are adaptable based on the demand you place upon them. So if you appropriately do that over time, they get stronger. That is one that I wish to completely abolish. There's not a lot of value out of complete rest, for 24 hours or 48 hours, right? There's not really a reason for that. Bed rest is really for someone, even people that are in the hospital on some of those severe life-threatening things. Like I used to work in the ICU. The people that had heart transplants or, LVADs or any of these open heart surgeries, we were getting them up 4 hours after surgery. We literally just split open their chest and did an open heart surgery, and they're required to get out of bed within the afternoon.
That's crazy.
We're hauling all of their equipment, their IV, all their tubes, all the equipment to move, because it was so important to move. We have people on ECMO, right? I just posted a video about this yesterday. This is the standard of care, right? ECMO is the highest level of life-saving medical care, but we are getting them moving. And they got tubes everywhere. They got a whole team of equipment that they're walking down the hallways. That's the standard of care. So rest, get it out, throw it out of your recovery, because that's not a part of recovery. That is literally something we shouldn't do. Active recovery. That means switching up the sport. Means if you're going to go run like crazy, maybe go for a swim, maybe go for a hike, but just switch up the movement patterns so that way you're not repeating the same things. That is the way we recover, is we do something different.
I'm going to have to apply that to my own exercise routine.
Switch it up.
Get a
different activity.
So our next myth that everyone wants to know is, if you're not sore, you didn't work hard enough.
Yeah, that's not necessarily true. There's some value to getting sore because you broke down the muscle. But when you have soreness is DOMS, which DOMS stands for delayed onset muscle soreness, which is pretty much little microfiber tears within a muscle. That means you just push the muscle beyond its ability to produce the force that you needed, right? But that doesn't mean you didn't have improvements. That just means that maybe you haven't worked that muscle group in a while and now you challenged it a little too much. But a good rule of thumb is if you're sore more than 24 to 48 hours, that means you push the muscle a little too hard. Where the window that we're shooting for is either, no muscle soreness, or even better, maybe a little bit of muscle soreness, that 24 to 48 hour mark. But you don't have to feel sore every time you work out. That is not the goal. The goal is to challenge the muscle to fatigue. And there's different ways to do it. You're challenging muscle through power, through endurance, through strength. Like in each one of those types of workouts are very different. Like, which one are you trying to improve? If you're working to improve power, but you're going to go run 50 miles, that's not going to improve your power. That'll improve your endurance. So if you want to work on power, you work on powerful things, explosive things, right? But soreness can happen from different types of training, and you don't have to be sore to know that you're making benefits.
Our next one is and I think this one's my favorite, you can out-train poor sleep.
You can out-train poor sleep. Tell me what that means.
If you train hard enough, you don't have to sleep.
I don't know who wrote that, but we gotta just throw that out the window. You need sleep. I think we've already addressed that one. Is like, you gotta have sleep. Like, you will train so hard. If you look at any kind of recovery watch or ring, and your body is the ring is telling you you've only recovered 40% from the last day, is today a good day to train hard? Right? No, you need your body's ability to recover. And heart rate variability is kind of the gold standard to determine how much your body's recovered from the last day. And Whoop published some interesting data. They actually thought their devices were not working well because everyone across the world, they saw that their recovery was going drastically down. And they're like, our watches are defective. And then they realized it was COVID. COVID was a pandemic was happening, but people weren't recovering because they were faced with this pandemic, right? And it was so cool to see that, because heart rate variability is the gold standard for measuring if you've fully recovered from the previous day. Now, is it a perfect tool? No, but it's the best one that we have, and it's giving good data to help you make good fitness decisions. If you're recovered from 30% from the previous day, should you go run a half marathon or a marathon or do some crazy workout or push yourself to the next level? Probably not, because your body is saying it cannot produce what you're expecting it to produce, because it needs to get back to that 90-100% level. I'm not saying don't work out. Active recovery is the tool, right, that we want to do there. But don't go do something crazy either. Our next one is the more recovery tools I use, the better. So we're kind of going back to that same thought process of do the 3 pillars. And I'll add the 4th pillar, which is really important, and that's the mental, psychological piece. And I don't mean to throw all those into the same one, but that would be a pillar that we can't neglect. So again, the pillars are nutrition, sleep, and movement. And then I think I'll add that social, psychological component to it as well. I think that's really important. But we got to do the right things first, right? The more tools you have is better. I don't really know the answer to that. You got to determine that for yourself. But more is not always better. Do the simple things right first, and then add the other tools on top of it. Sometimes we get obsessive about all these tools, but we really get the most amount of recovery, the 90%, from the 3 to 4 pillars. Do those things extremely well first. Take care of yourself first, and then add in these supplemental tools that can help you. And I hope if there's anything that our viewers get from this podcast, it is that. Do the simple things well. Because there are simple things that don't cost money, excessive money, that you're getting most amount of recovery for. Use these extra tools, Theraguns, compression, saunas, cold plunges, all as supplemental. And if they help you with the mental component, they help you with the psychological or the social, do them, right? But do the other things well first. So thank you for joining us on this podcast. I hope that abolishes a lot of myths that are out there and gives a lot of clarity on what we're really trying to do with recovery. Because again, recovery comes from just taking care of yourself with the simple things, and then add the supplemental stuff later.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you very much, Brad.
Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
Anytime.